It is a high-stakes game of blockade chicken. The U.S. asserts control over the Strait of Hormuz, trying to choke off Iranian revenue and, importantly, worry China. Iran, for its part, threatens retaliation, and the U.S., well, it threatens to restart the whole war. Here's what we know. Vessels aren't budging. Markets remain perplexed. Expulsion fever seizes the House of Representatives. No fewer than 4 lawmakers might be in the dock this week. The newest, California Democrat Eric Swalwell, accused of sexual assault. We explore all of this with the key Democrat on the House Ethics Committee. Shifting political winds, apparently favoring Democrats in swing states. The president making himself look like Jesus. Oh, in his fight with Pope Leo. Hungarian strongman Viktor Orban loses big and then concedes. So much to get to, we need twice as much political panel time. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. Blockades can work. Sparta used one to defeat the Athenians in the Peloponnesian War. The European army used them to great effect to block cotton exports from the South during the Civil War, starving the Confederacy of revenue. They were used in World War I against Germany and the Central Powers, and again in World War II against Germany and the Axis powers. In 1962, to avert a potential nuclear conflict, President John F. Kennedy used a blockade to keep Soviet missiles out of Cuba. Now, a new blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. Navy is now monitoring traffic. The first goal, deprive Iran of revenue. The second goal, use that financial deprivation to drive Iranians back to the negotiating table and in a more compliant mood. The U.S. Navy and American aerial assets have eyes on all Iranian actions or provocations. The president believes this is a new pressure point. Is it? Iran has threatened energy infrastructure in the entire Gulf. Is it bluffing? Can it inflict genuine harm or just pretend? The days ahead will reveal who has what, who's willing to risk what, and who has the power to make a new reality stick. Because however this goes down, when this is over, the Strait of Hormuz will not operate as it was once operating. It is also not an exaggeration to say President Trump is betting the midterm elections and the political fate of his presidency on this particular gambit. His poll numbers, as we will discuss soon with Anthony Salvanto, continue to suffer as gas prices rise and inflation continues to, well, irritate. Also, Trump appears increasingly volatile and self-absorbed, swearing more frequently, bathing himself in Christ-like imagery as he did this weekend, imagery that even his most ardent supporters regard as absolutely or quite nearly blasphemous. Trump has been reveling in playing the madman role with Iran. Is it one giant troll, a ladder of erratic acts and comments meant to keep his adversaries off balance, or is it a sign the pressures are getting to him and his options, strategic, military, and diplomatically, are in fact diminishing? The Strait of Hormuz, originally not a part of this whole Iran war at all, may in the end reveal all. For a sense of the president's latest thinking, we turn to Weijia Jiang, who quite helpfully for us asked the president several questions today. Weij?
Hey, Major. It's good to be with you and to talk to everybody. So President Trump, you're right, is pretty defiant these days about his decision, not only with regard to starting the Iran war, but also about his latest threat in the Strait of Hormuz. He said that the blockade is underway and that any Iranian warship that comes near the U.S. missiles will essentially be blown to bits. But this outstanding question is still how it will impact the president and his political future for the rest of his term. There may be a world, Major, in which the strait is not an issue, in which gas prices are not an issue, and the president's choice to take out Iran's capabilities militarily, or at least degrade them to the extent that the U.S. has, is wildly popular, but that's not the world that we live in, because there are consequences that Americans are feeling. And the president was directly asked in an interview over the weekend, could these gas prices remain high until the midterm elections? And he said it is a possibility that they go down, that they stay the same, or go up even higher. So it's still a huge question mark, Major, as the president continues to defend his decision here.
We'll get to that imagery of the president that many interpret as looking like Jesus in a second. But very quickly, Weege, also the president said today that there are more conversations going on with the Iranians?
Well, the president last night tried to downplay the failure to produce an agreement over the weekend. But he also said, I don't care. I don't care if Iran comes back to the table. That's up to them. Then today, he said that the other side has called and they are begging to make a deal. So he says that they are eager to restart talks. And CBS News has confirmed that Pakistan is ramping up efforts to try to do just that with a second meeting. Now, of course, preparations are likely already underway because for the other meeting that just happened in Pakistan, Major, this was very last minute. It was a scramble to make sure there was enough security for the vice president to go there and to meet face to face with the Iranians. So the White House likely learned from that experience. The president himself said that security was going to be an issue there. But we don't have a date. The president was asked explicitly today when that might happen, and he didn't want to provide any details. But he sure sounded optimistic and said that, Iran is eager to continue the conversation.
Very quickly, Weege, I want you to play the sound for the audience. What did the president say about this AI-generated image that drew so much backlash from not only evangelical Christian supporters, but just Christians generally within the MAGA movement?
Well, Major, I actually asked him because, in the past, he has claimed that it wasn't him that posted images that ended up being controversial. That wasn't the case today. Here was his answer.
Well, it wasn't depiction. It was me. I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor, and had to do with Red Cross as a Red Cross worker there, which we support. And only the fake news could come up with that one. So I just heard about it, and I said, how did they come up with that? It's supposed to be me as a doctor making people better, and I do make people better. I make people a lot better.
What he did not answer was to his conservative base, who really took issue with this, and why he took it down, Major, if he felt it was him depicted as a doctor and not as Jesus Christ.
One of the many mysteries of this Monday. Weege Jiang, North Lawn of the White House. Thank you. CBS News national security analyst Aaron McClain joins me now. I'm going to walk over to the full screen. Aaron, always great to see you. Thank you. He also hosts a very good podcast called The School of War. What's going on? Help my audience understand what is or isn't happening and how the U.S. Navy is going about it. A little bit of confusion about that.
There has been. So the president announced over the weekend, Major, that the United States would blockade the Strait of Hormuz. Now, this was a little perplexing because, as most of our viewers will remember, Iran is already blockading the Strait of Hormuz, which is this narrow passage right here between the Persian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman, and the Arabian Sea beyond. Now, Sunday evening, Central Command, which is the military organization that will actually be enforcing this, came out and clarified and said, actually, what's being stopped is traffic into and out of Iranian ports. Now, what this does is it will level the strategic playing field. Up until now, throughout the course of this war, ships with Iran's permission, and we presume willing to pay some kind of toll, a handful have been getting out. Nobody else is allowed to get out because they get shot at, many of them, if they try. Now it seems that nobody's going to be getting out, at least for some time.
Because the U.S. Navy is basically saying, what? If you move in this area, either here or here, we need to inspect you. We need to board you. We need to. How is that playing out ship to ship, vessel to vessel?
Right. So our Navy is going to be operating largely out here in the Arabian Sea and into the Gulf of Oman. This is where you'll see our operations largely taking place. The Iranians, of course, are currently in the strait itself. Ships, of course, are meant to broadcast their point of origin. their ultimate destination, the nature of their cargo. That's all meant to be information that's on public record. It may or may not shock you to hear, Major, that some of these ships lie, especially if they're taking
I've read about
oil.
that, yes.
Yeah, so in addition to the publicly available information, our Navy will be surveilling what's coming in and out of Iranian ports. And you recall, we've talked a lot about Karg Island, this Iranian terminus point or transit point for oil. We're going to be keeping a close eye on that. This is, in effect, also a blockade of Karg Island.
Right. And there are a lot of vessels here just waiting.
That's right.
They were there before this got started, and they're just waiting. And they now know the U.S. Navy's there. So it's not as if this is an accelerant to ships moving through. It's actually holding up everything, which leads us to the question I kind of tried to get to in the monologue. Who can take this pain longer? Because if these vessels are still here 3 weeks from now, that means oil prices are still going to be high. Global markets are still going to be rattled. Who's going to have the upper hand?
So there's a race here, and there's two clocks running. One clock is on Iran's economy and the ability of the Iranian regime to pay its security forces who are blocking the strait. The other clock, of course, is the global economy. It's a bit like the Iranians have hijacked a plane, but the passengers are the global economy. And it's an open, blockades can take time. So that's a dangerous game to just let those two clocks run. I do wonder if we will see in the days and weeks to come more active American efforts to get the strait open to friendly traffic. You saw U.S. Navy ships transit close to the international lanes in the strait. I can zoom in on that just a little bit. Ships are meant to come down these white parallel lines that are running through the center here. You saw U.S. Navy vessels go through there on Saturday, very notably, potentially clearing or looking for mines. We'll see what's to come there soon.
Aaron McLean, it's always great to have you and the touchscreen working together. Fantastic stuff. Thank you. I'm joined now by Nicholas Burns, good friend of the show. He served as U.S. Ambassador to China during the Biden administration and Ambassador to NATO during George W. Bush's administration. Ambassador, always great to have you. You heard our conversation. What's your sense of things right now, and what are you looking for in the next 2 to 3 days?
Well, we have a double blockade of the Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman, the Strait of Hormuz, as your correspondent rightly said. And this is something that is not unusual. The threat of force, the use of force, a blockade in a situation like this, it's high risk. Either side could move toward a violent act, particularly the Iranians, if they want to try to enforce their end of the blockade. So that's what's risky about this. But I think, Major, it might also help the negotiations. I think there was a very low probability that the Islamabad talks over the weekend were going to be successful. We had not met the Iranians at that level since 1978 at the vice president or presidential level. And I think neither side had interest in trying to make fundamental compromises. So what may happen is that as this blockade is introduced, hopefully, there are going to be quiet talks, maybe even secret talks, we'll see, between the two sides to try to lower the temperature and to see if there's some kind of compromise that would allow both sides to claim victory in a week or 2 or 3 from now and avoid a resumption of warfare because, as you know, the ceasefire expires on April 22nd, just over a week from now. So I think that's kind of the deadline. That's point one, Major. And just one more quick point. It really is in the interest of Donald Trump to create a bigger global coalition to pressure the Iranians. And that's the Gulf Arab states right across from the Iranians. It's also the European allies and Japan and South Korea, maybe even China behind the scenes to put pressure on the Iranians to open up the Gulf to traffic without Iran being a toll keeper. And therefore the blocker of access. I hope that's what the Trump administration is going to do.
And Nick, let's reverse engineer what you just said. Walk my audience through the China part of it, and then how likely it is from your vantage point the Europeans become part of even a soft coalition.
The Chinese have a couple of interests here. They've been a close partner of Iran and protector of Iran for many years. They import about 1.4 million barrels a day. They import most of Iran's oil, so they're really important to the Iranians. The Chinese are not going to take the U.S. side. That would be politically disadvantageous for them. But the Chinese have a larger interest here. They have more invested in terms of money, capital, in the Gulf Arab states than they do from Iran. They clearly want the strait open. So it could be that at the end of the day, the Chinese could be a voice, a factor in trying to push the Iranians. Let's hope. The Chinese premier, Li Chang, said today, we want to be helpful in getting to a ceasefire and getting to a resolution of the Strait problem. And on the Europeans, I think it's on us. President Trump is angry at them. I think he needs to get over that and understand that if the Gulf can be opened, the Strait can be opened, the Europeans have said they'll put together a military coalition to enforce a peace agreement, i.e. in the Strait of Hormuz itself. We need their support. And I think the president has been unnecessarily antagonistic and critical of our NATO allies.
Very quickly, Nick, about a minute. I've read that this is on a knife's edge. That's a very important sort of helpful metaphor. One small thing, one act of provocation from the Iranians could spill this in a quite different direction. True?
It could. If the Iranians try to send a Shahed drone or a ballistic missile at one of those U.S. naval vessels, the United States would have to defend itself, obviously, and fire back. That could blow the ceasefire apart. It could lead to an intensification of the bombing, the Israeli and American bombing of Iran. Clearly, that's not in the interest of either side right now. They're both looking for an exit, and diplomacy is going to be the way that has to happen. So I hope we're going to see some quiet talks in the next couple of days between the two sides, probably with Pakistan as the mediator.
And some probably in the rearview mirror, we'll learn all sorts of interesting, unknown intermediaries. That's usually the way it works.
Exactly.
Nick
right.
Burns, always a pleasure. Great to have you, sir. Thanks so very much.
You bet.
New CBS News polling finds many Americans, maybe quite understandably, worried about the Iran war and skeptical of the United States under President Trump meeting its stated goals. Joining me now, your friend and mine, CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, at his own big screen. We have rival big screens going on here in segment one of the show. So, net, how do Americans feel about the war?
No maps, but we got poll numbers. Look, what you just explained at the top there, Major, people don't like uncertainty. And what we've seen since the start of the war was people saying they didn't feel like the administration was explaining what the goals were. So I followed up this week. And I said, well, why is that? And 2/3 of people said it's because they feel like they've been changing the goals all along. And that's hard to keep up with. That's what I mean by uncertainty. So when I ask, OK, what is it important for the U.S. to be doing in Iran, you get big bipartisan numbers. Look at these goals. Permanently stop the nuclear program, stop Iran from threatening others, make sure Iran's people are safe. The top one you get is open the Strait of Hormuz, which people don't think has been done yet. They don't think any of these things have been done yet. And that comes back to gas prices, right? That comes back to inflation. And there I want to show you this, which is that people's, given Trump's jobs ratings here, his inflation numbers have gone down. Sort of first law of politics. Gas prices go up, your inflation and your job ratings go down.
No doubt. So in the Trump era, his support among evangelicals a constant. If I remember correctly, he won Catholics by 8% in 2016, about even, maybe lost by a point or two to Biden in 2020, then won them by about 12 or so in 2024. What do we know about, from your polling, what he's done on the internet recently, the president, and this spat with Pope Leo? Can you break any of that down for us?
I can, and start with this. This is your approval among Catholics from the latest poll of the conflict in Iran. You see majority disapproval, yes, but the approval basically matches the U.S. population, so that's about even. But when we talk about Catholics, the thing I want to point out to everybody is, as with other religions, it's religiosity, as measured in this case by how often you attend Mass, you go to church. When you look at folks who go weekly, approval of the conflict and approval of Trump overall is much higher than people who attend less often. So I'm showing you the overall job numbers there, and I'm going to show you by church attendance. Again, in a relative way, here's the conflict, and this is a little bit more approving among folks who attend more weekly. What that tells you is that when you watch this, it's folks who are, again, by this proxy, more attendant. The religiosity matters within Catholics in the U.S., Major.
Anthony Salvanto, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you. Still to come on the Takeout, California Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell ends his bid for governor after allegations arise of sexual misconduct, more than one allegation. I will speak with Virginia Democratic Congressman and Ethics Committee member Suhas Subramaniam about that and much more. Plus, the escalating conflict between President Trump, and we just discussed this with Anthony Salvanto, the Vatican. President Biden's liaison to the Catholic Church joins tonight's political panel. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. The House Ethics Committee today has announced that it's opened an investigation to California Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell. This after a series of sexual misconduct allegations arose starting Friday. California Democrat has apologized in a video for mistakes in judgment and morals. But also in that video, he vowed to fight the allegations, possibly in court. A federal criminal investigation has also begun into this matter. Swalwell, once near the top of a crowded field of Democrats running for governor, suspended his campaign. There also may be a move in the House to expel him. Torian Small has the latest from Capitol Hill. And Torian, as I understand it, the latest came out just a moment ago, a statement from Arizona Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego. What do we know?
Yeah, pretty poignant from him. He said that he supported the effort to expel him, saying that he shouldn't be a member of Congress considering these very serious allegations against him. In his statement, he had this one piece that said he trusted someone he believed was a friend, but now it's clear that he's not the person he thought he knew. This is notable because it joins a long list of Democrats who withdrew their support for his gubernatorial bid ultimately before Swalwell dropped out. He's now joined by 3 other members of Congress who are also facing serious allegations about either misconduct or wrongdoing. All of them under, if not have been investigated under currently investigation by the House Ethics Committee. That includes Representatives Mill, Gonzalez, and Sherfel McCormick from Texas. That's quite the list there. I will say also, Major, this is pretty notable. We haven't really seen lawmakers being expelled from Congress without a criminal conviction, except for George Santos. He was the last member, and he joins only one of 5 members of Congress to have been expelled from Congress. Santos being a bit messy himself on social media, saying that he's heard rumors about quite a few lawmakers, and he finds it quite hypocritical that now lawmakers are willing to get serious about some of these misconduct allegations that have been floating around.
And very quickly, Torian, so our audience understands, if it doesn't know or didn't immerse itself in this over the weekend, the allegations against Congressman Swalwell are serious and violent in nature. We are not talking about harassment or hostile workplace. We're talking about some pretty nasty stuff alleged.
Yeah, and there's also the power dynamic that's a part of this as well. These were staffers to Swalwell who are coming out now saying that he sexually assaulted them. Swalwell, of course, is denying these allegations. But again, it's not sitting well with lawmakers across the aisle. There are Democrats and Republicans supporting his ouster and also looking to group in those other 3 lawmakers that we mentioned there as part of this expulsion campaign.
Torian Small, Capitol Hill. Always a pleasure. Thank you very much. Up next, my conversation with Ethics Committee member Suhas Subramaniam. That's next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Thank you very much for staying with us. Here's a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. Hungary will have a new prime minister for the first time in 16 years. This after Viktor Orban, you see him there, a strongman endorsed by President Trump, conceded a landslide defeat yesterday. Vice President J.D. Vance campaigned for Orban last week. Hungary's Prime Minister-be Peter Mayor once worked in Orban's party, but he left it in 2024 in protest over what he said, and many voters clearly in Hungary believe this, widespread corruption in the Orban government. Mayor is seen as a more pro-European Union politician who also is expected to distance the government from Russia's Vladimir Putin. Federal judge today dismissed President Trump's $10 billion lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal over its reporting of a birthday letter Trump allegedly sent to Jeffrey Epstein in 2003. Trump accused the newspaper of defamation, claiming he was not the author of the lewd note and that the journal failed to properly investigate the matter. The judge said the fact that the Wall Street Journal asked the president for a comment and its other investigatory efforts in the story disprove Trump's complaint. The court said Trump could, if he wanted to, refile the lawsuit, which the president today claimed as a nominal victory and vowed to do so. Turning back to the allegations of sexual misconduct against California Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell. Earlier today, I spoke with Virginia Congressman Suhas Subramaniam about that and a lot more. Please take a listen. Congressman, the House Ethics Committee on which you serve announced today there will be an investigation into Eric Swalwell, California Democrat. Why?
Like any other member of Congress, Democrat or Republican, we take all allegations seriously. We have a code of conduct in the House of Representatives, and so we are going to look into this matter and see what happens and take the necessary steps afterwards based on what we find.
How can the Ethics Committee do that when there has been a federal criminal investigation also announced?
It's actually pretty common for us to do investigations while there's also a federal criminal investigation happening. We have a few other matters in our docket, for instance, where that is the case. So this is, again, we are not sending people to jail. We are, at worst, kicking them out of Congress or else giving them some form of sanctions within Congress. But we are self-governing, and this is an important part of making sure that the integrity of the body is upheld.
You talked about kicking members out of Congress. I don't need to tell you, Congressman, that there is something approximating an expulsion fever currently gripping the House of Representatives. There might be a move this week to expel Eric Swalwell, Tony Gonzalez, who's a Republican from Texas, Corey Mills, a Republican from Florida, and Sheila Surfalis McCormick, a Democrat from Florida. What is your position on this expulsion fever?
Well, since I serve on the committee, I can't really comment directly on whether someone should be expelled or not. I will just say generally that that is on the table for any member of Congress who breaks a rule where that is applicable. And so if someone breaks a rule where expulsion is the cure there, then we do apply it. And we apply it to Democrats and Republicans equally.
But I would believe you would, or I suspect you'd be in favor of at least a process by which allegations could be reviewed by some entity other than a particular member of the House who says, well, that sounds worthy of expulsion to me. That's what the House Ethics Committee is supposed to be there for, is it not? To be this one entity, imperfect though it is, to at least give the accused a chance and a process to be carried out to run some of this to ground.
Yeah, in the end, if people want to bring up votes, that's their prerogative. And if the majority of the body feels a certain way, that's its prerogative. What I do on the House Ethics Committee with my colleagues is investigate, make sure that the proper due process is afforded to every member, and that we look very carefully into both what happened and get the facts forward, and then apply the right recommendation based on what we found to the whole body for them to vote on.
Without naming names, just as an abstract observation, as a member of the committee, do you think the committee should work its process before any real serious move to expel anyone should be commenced?
Again, I can't comment on that specifically. I will say that we do have a really good process, and we have really top-notch investigators and lawyers on our committee and our staff that look through these allegations very seriously and carefully, and they deliberate on them. Sometimes people aren't excited about our timeline, but that's just because we take this very seriously. We take all allegations seriously, and we afford them the right amount of scrutiny, as well as make sure that the consequences match what we found.
You're also on the House Oversight Committee, the committee which on a bipartisan basis issued a subpoena to then Attorney General Pam Bondi. The administration has now said, since she is no longer Attorney General, that subpoena is null and void. How does the committee enforce that subpoena against the former Attorney General in the Epstein matter?
Just because she's no longer Attorney General doesn't mean she shouldn't be coming forward and testifying before a committee. We said the words Attorney General were not in our subpoena at all. And so she's not off the hook. I think she never wanted to come to us in the first place. Even when she was Attorney General, we asked her point blank whether she intended on coming before a committee, and she would not say yes. She avoided the question. So I think she doesn't want to talk to us. That's the reality of it. And I think she has a lot to say to us. So we're going to continue pursuing her and making sure that she comes before us because she has a lot of questions to answer, especially about the Epstein matter.
After the First Lady said there should be a public hearing, some survivors of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell applauded that. Some did not and said, we've said all we need to say. Do you want a special public hearing for survivors alone?
The Democrats on the committee were already planning on having such a forum in Florida, actually. And right. We welcome the opportunity for any survivor to come forward, and we'll give them that forum if they would like. I will say I've talked to many survivors who don't like that she shifted the burden onto them once again. They've been let down so many times by law enforcement. They told their stories only to be betrayed by law enforcement later on. And frankly, Melania Trump should come before our committee because she's in the files, and there's a lot out there about her and her relationship with Epstein. And so if she wants to clear her name, which appeared to be one of the motives of coming out at that time, then she should come before our committee and tell us what she does know.
What do you want to ask the First Lady?
I want to ask why she's pictured with Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, what her relationship was with them. There's many emails where she's corresponding with them, and I want to know what she knows about the president's relationship with them. And most of all, I want her and her husband, the president, to release the 2.5 million files that they are withholding that the Department of Justice has.
Before I let you go, Congressman, there is a very important election going on in the Commonwealth of Virginia as we speak. Election day ends on April 21st. It's about redrawing district maps there. The early turnout suggests it's most heavy in Republican districts. That is to say, Republicans may be voting out in larger numbers than Democrats to support this. What's your sense of how this is going to actually play out?
Many Democrats vote by mail, and they also vote in person early. And so this past weekend, I was at the polls for early voting, and I saw a huge lines that I actually haven't seen in recent history. So that suggests to me that a lot of Democrats are now coming out. They're just coming out later. There is some confusion about whether Democrats support this or not. It's very clear that Democrats do want people to vote yes in Virginia. And so now that that message is out, the Democratic voters are coming out in full force because they want to even the playing field in the midterms. And so you're going to see a lot more Democrats come between now and April 21st.
And you're predicting victory for Democrats in this matter?
I am, yes. I'm very confident at this point that it won't be as close. It'll be closer than California. We're not California. We're a purple-blue state, but we're still a blue state. And that's been shown in recent history. Abigail Spanberger won by 15 points last November. We expected not to be that much, but to comfortably win this referendum.
Virginia Democrat Sue Subramaniam, I appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
I always like to tell you how we do our work here. That was a pre-tape. That's what we call it. And that's immune to new news. And we have brand new news on what we were just discussing, the fate of Congressman Eric Swalwell. He just announced he's resigning. So let me turn back to Torian Small on Capitol Hill. Torian.
Yeah, Major, that news coming down as lawmakers were headed to votes here in the Senate. I immediately sprinted back to this camera once I saw this tweet from Congressman Swallwell. But in it, he started, as he's done in previous statements, by apologizing to his family and friends about the drama that this has caused for them, but ultimately going on to say he's resigning. He's also acknowledging this investigation into him by the House Ethics Committee, as well as these expulsion calls from folks across the aisle. He says expelling anyone in Congress without due process within days of an allegation being made is wrong, but also wrong for my constituents to have me distracted from my duties. Therefore, I plan to resign from my seat in Congress. I want to point out an interesting parallel here on the Hill. There was a congressman known as Matt Gaetz from Florida. He was under investigation by the House Ethics Committee for illicit drug use, allegations of sexual misconduct, and he was also tapped to be President Trump's attorney general. That's when we really saw this groundswell of support for him to be ousted or his name to be withdrawn from that. Not only did he withdraw his name from that, but he resigned amid threats from members of the House Ethics Committee to release their findings of their investigation into him. This was typically used as a tool to encourage lawmakers to resign without having to go through the expulsion process. This is pretty effective here in Swalwell's case, avoiding this expulsion by taking matters into his own hands and pulling himself away from the seat, Major.
Friday to Monday, a very quick end to a congressional career. Torian Small on Capitol Hill, thanks very much. We already had plenty of political news to get to, but we're going to have our political panel talk about Eric Swalwell and much else when we get back. 2 segments, not one tonight, 2. You want to stay tuned for that. Takeout comes back your way in a couple minutes. Welcome back to Takeout. Political panel time. Let me introduce them to you. Democratic strategist John McCarthy. And it's important for the conversation today. Served as senior advisor for President Biden and was the administration's emissary liaison to the Catholic Church. And Republican strategist T.W. Origi, right?
Nailed it.
Excellent.
Nailed it. Nicely
Excellent.
done.
A lot of challenging names today. I bollocks them a lot, but I got that one all right. Most recently served as National Press Secretary for the Senate Republican Campaign Committee, and you also worked for Lindsey Graham, right?
I did.
Okay.
I did indeed.
So, Eric Swalwell, John, I want to get your interpretation of this because we are talking about an incredibly compressed time schedule. Allegations, very serious ones, that were backed up by some medical records, some contemporaneous notifications to friends, family from some of the victims. Swalwell denies it. Lots of pressure. People start pulling endorsements. And then out of Congress within 3 days, less than 3 days.
Yeah. And I mean, yes, the timeline is compressed, but I think that all of these conversations need to start from a place of saying how, the bravery of the women that came forward really grounds this entire thing. And I will say that while the timeline was compressed, I mean, it was pretty unified in terms of the party. I mean, his lead endorsers, some people who said that they were close friends, rescinded endorsements very quickly. You saw it basically from House leadership. You saw it from a lot of the kind of party elders. You saw it from his own staff.
And in California Democratic politics, Nancy Pelosi is super important. Has outsized importance and was close to Eric Swalwell.
Yes. And to me, I mean, I think that that is something that is very telling between the political parties at this moment. I think the Democrats have tried to make clear that this is something that our party is not going to have any tolerance for. So, I mean, between the staff activists, the people who worked for him and the elected officials in our party, it was a compressed timeline, but I think it shows you that Democrats don't want anything to do with this.
And to John's point, TW, the question of Epstein and whether or not you are treating that as something that's about the victims and their pursuit of justice, or if you're politicizing it, as some Republicans have alleged Democrats are doing, if a Swalwell thing comes up, you only have one choice.
Yeah, and that's why you're seeing those moves to expel members of both parties coming up right now, and why they're gaining more traction. Look, John and I have both worked on Capitol Hill, and we were just saying—
and I was there for years.
Yeah, you always hear whispers of wrongdoing. It's not new, members of Congress behaving poorly. But in our current age, in our digital age, those whispers can spread much quicker. And people now have larger platforms than they ever had as staffers and otherwise. So I think it's not new, but there's a lot more that's still rotten in Congress and that's going to come out. And
as both of you know, as Hill staffers, there is an interpretation of the Ethics Committee as it's either there to protect or to sort of gently, through a long and drawn-out investigatory process, nudge the baddest actors out. But it's an elongated process. The congressman from Virginia acknowledged that. This compressed time schedule tells us, in Swalwell's case, if things are bad enough, forget the Ethics Committee. It can go really quickly.
I would also just add, though, I do think that this is a generational shift in both parties. As younger members in both the Democratic and Republican Party are trying to find ways to move up, they're looking around, and I mean, the tolerance for this is just the old boys club of Washington thing is just totally over. I mean, something that might have been able to had a blind eye towards it, a couple decades ago, is completely gone now in Washington.
Or play
and
it off, or let it see if it'll die down.
Exactly.
Again, with social media the way it is, you can't hide it anymore very well.
Yes, right.
And so a lot of these members
things
who are
get
behaving
amplified very quickly.
Absolutely, and you're going to see a lot more downfalls.
And John, we're going to talk about this on the other side of the break, but I want to get this started. The Pope and the President of the United States and the Vatican. It's like a throwdown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Your impressions.
I mean, where to even almost begin on this? I mean, first off, I mean, I think we're both Catholic school kids. You would never pick a fight with the Pope. I mean, that's just like a good kind of like rule of thumb to start with.
Of course, I remember that in 2016, Trump did. He wasn't even nominee yet.
And I mean, I would say this, though, right? Like, we think of things in a political lens. We're here in Washington. The Pope, 8 out of 10 American Catholics have a positive feeling towards the Holy Father. Donald Trump's approval rating on the best day ever comes nowhere close to that. So just from sheer politics, I mean, him going after the Pope is a ridiculous move.
American Pope.
Exactly. And I mean, there are 36 states in this country where Americans or where Catholics make up the majority of people of faith in those states. And if you're a Republican in Congress, right, and the president is going after the Pope, the biggest concentrations of those places are California, New York, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Iowa. The overlap with all of that is that those places are some of the most competitive House seats coming up at this election. So, I mean, every single day, President Trump gives you something that you want to kind of run away from as a House Republican, but this one is particularly bad.
TW, I'm going to give you a chance to jump in on that, but when we come back from the other side of the break,
Not
we
a
have
problem.
2 panels, not just one. Sometimes I get a little deprived of the second panel. Not tonight. Quick break. Join us when we come back. More political panel time. Welcome back to the Takeout. TW, I asked you to wait, and you did.
Patiently.
Jump in.
Look, John is on the right track here. In politics, it's an addition game. It's not a subtraction game. The Catholic Church right now is booming. There's been articles written about it incessantly the past few weeks, especially among young voters. And I think Pope Leo's had a bunch to do with that as the first American Pope. And so I don't see the upside of attacking the Pope, the vicar of Christ on earth, who, yes, is always going to push for peace and less death. Right. That's kind of his job.
It's sort of built in anti-war.
Yeah.
Hello.
And look, the Pope's brother, I guess, likes the president, as he likes saying all the time.
Right.
But my guess is if you keep bashing his brother, he might change his mind. So we don't want to lose him either.
Also, I want you to, and I'll give you a chance on this, TW, to weigh in first. The imagery the president posted, the AI-generated thing, which he said today, and this almost felt like a troll itself, a troll upon a troll.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I was a doctor.
Yeah.
How many doctors are depicted with golden light coming out of not one but both hands? Please show that. Golden light coming out of both hands. Okay? Sorry. I'm not buying it, and I don't think those who found it offensive and borderline, if not entirely blasphemous, are buying it either.
Absolutely. And Riley Gaines was like a little humility. Of all people, said a little humility would do you good. Look, Trump will never say, I'm sorry. Nope. So he's always going to find a way out of it, and I wish he would sometimes, because this obviously rubbed a ton of people the wrong way.
Legitimately so.
Including probably the DoorDash driver who was there when he said it. So, yeah, a little humility would have gone a long way. I don't think people are buying the excuse. Again, it's an unforced error.
Yeah, I mean, this image here that we just saw, and I mean, even go back a little bit when he posted the image after the death of Pope Francis of him kind of in an AI version of himself as Pope. Yes, you can kind of laugh about those, but in the interview we saw on Sunday with the 3 American cardinals, I actually thought that, exactly, I thought that Cardinal Cupich's comment out of Chicago was the most appropriate, where he sat and said that he was very disturbed by the gamification of war. And these things are funny, but the imagery that the president has poped almost glorifying the taking of lives is something that's not funny. So I think that, yes, many people of faith are offended by that, but I actually think if you ask more people of faith and broadly people of goodwill, they would find the kind of callousness that he talks about these things with to be more alarming than these.
Let me ask you, John, about some Cook Political Report moves over the weekend that indicated in some swing states, North Carolina, Georgia, Ohio, Iowa, Nebraska rather, some shifts not to predicted Democratic victories, but away from where things looked more solidly for the Republicans.
Right. I mean, midterm elections are always about the party in power, right? They are always a referendum on that. And I think that right now we feel pretty good about the House. And these political wins are certainly putting Senate races more into the favor of Democrats than they probably would have been. I still think it's an uphill fight there. But one of the things that I think we really need to pay attention to in these Senate candidates is the quality of candidates that have been recruited. It's not just because of the political wins in these places. It's because Cooper is really great for North Carolina, and Sherrod Brown is really great for Ohio. So, I mean, even if there were the best wins without those candidates, I don't know that those states come online. But because those leaders have stepped up to run, we might see something come November.
TW?
Yeah, absolutely. I worked at the senatorial committee.
Yes, right.
I know
you know how they measure all this stuff and how they sift things.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, to your point, John's point, the president's in power. The Republicans have control. They are the focus of all the messaging. And right now we are in a war, and gas prices are rising. So yes, you're seeing discomfort. However, I would just point out that if we're going to compare it to, say, a 2018, where it was a massive wave away from Republicans, I would just note that the Democrats on a generic ballot are still underperforming where they were there. And, oh, yeah, their favorability rating is still lower than that of Republicans.
They still have brand ID
They have
problems.
massive brand ID problems. So, yes, candidates will always matter. And the Republicans need to do a good job of getting good candidates that can compete with their good candidates and try to figure out a mechanism to match their energy.
And as I started the show tonight, the Strait of Hormuz is going to have a lot to do with the president, diplomacy, strategy, and politics in the midterm. TW, great to have you here. John, always a pleasure. Happy Monday, everyone. You know what this is? Quick reminder, The Takeout, relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. Candy does not eat itself, gentlemen. Get after it. Daily Report coming your way next.